Good evening. Tonight we bring you a story that will be remembered as a turning point in the history of American trade policy. A moment when the rules of the game changed, not just for Washington, but for the entire world. Tonight we witness a seismic shift in American trade policy. The news is breaking and its implications are vast and far-reaching, touching every corner of the economy and every household in the nation. The Supreme Court has struck down the Trump-era tariffs on steel and aluminum, dismantling a key pillar of the previous administration's America First agenda. These tariffs, once hailed as a bold move to protect American industry, have now been declared unconstitutional, sending shockwaves through the business community and political establishment alike. For years, these tariffs reshaped global supply chains and redefined U.S. relationships with allies and rivals. They sparked trade wars, led to retaliatory measures from other countries, and forced American companies to adapt to a new reality of higher costs and shifting markets. Now, that era ends abruptly, opening a new chapter of uncertainty and opportunity. Factories, workers, and businesses across the country are left to wonder what comes next, as the old rules are swept away and a new landscape emerges. This isn't just a legal decision, it's a fundamental rebalancing of presidential power over international trade. The court's ruling sets a precedent, limiting the executive branch's ability to use national security as a catch-all justification for sweeping economic measures. The court questioned the use of national security as a broad justification for economic protectionism. Legal experts say this could reshape how future presidents approach trade, requiring more transparency and stronger evidence before imposing tariffs. The ruling's impact will ripple from Pennsylvania's steel mills to California's tech hubs, and from Brussels to Beijing. American manufacturers, global tech giants, and foreign governments are all recalibrating their strategies in response to this landmark decision. Washington is reeling. Lawmakers and industry leaders scramble to grasp the full scope. Some see new opportunities for growth and international cooperation, while others fear increased competition and job losses. For some, it's a return to free trade. For others, a threat to American industry. The debate is fierce, with passionate voices on both sides arguing over what's best for the country's future. Tonight, we break down the history, the legal battle, and what this means for the U.S. economy and its place in the world. We'll explore how we got here, what the court's decision really means, and what lies ahead for American workers, businesses, and families. Stay with us as we unpack a decision that will shape generations. The story is just beginning, and its consequences will be felt for years to come. To truly understand the significance of today's Supreme Court ruling, we need to take a step back and revisit the origins of the controversy. Section 232 has a long and complex history, rooted in America's ongoing struggle to balance economic interests with national security concerns. In 2018, the Trump administration made headlines by invoking Section 232 of the 1962 Trade Expansion Act. This rarely used provision gave the president broad authority to impose tariffs on imports that were considered threats to national security. The move was unprecedented in its scope and ambition, signaling a dramatic shift in U.S. trade policy. Sweeping tariffs soon followed, 25% on imported steel and 10% on aluminum. These measures didn't just target traditional rivals like China, they also affected close allies such as Canada, Mexico, and the European Union. The tariffs sent shockwaves through global markets and upended long-standing trade relationships. The administration argued that these steps were necessary to protect American producers and safeguard jobs, especially in industries vital to military readiness and national infrastructure. Supporters claimed the tariffs would revitalize domestic manufacturing and reduce dependence on foreign metals, but critics quickly sounded the alarm. They warned that higher costs for manufacturers and consumers were inevitable, and that the tariffs could trigger a global trade war. As predicted, tensions escalated rapidly, with other countries retaliating against American exports. Retaliatory tariffs hit a wide range of American goods, from agricultural products to industrial machinery, making it harder for U.S. businesses to compete abroad. The trade conflict soon became a defining issue in international relations. In the U.S., the response was deeply divided. Supporters in industrial states praised the move as a bold defense of American jobs and industries. Meanwhile, critics accused the administration of executive overreach and warned of lasting economic harm. The national security justification for the tariffs became a focal point of heated debate, both in Congress and in the courts. Legal challenges mounted, and the issue became a battleground for broader questions about presidential power and the limits of trade policy. The controversy not only polarized the nation, but also strained America's alliances, casting a shadow over international cooperation and economic stability. All of these tensions and disagreements have led us to this moment, today's historic Supreme Court verdict, which will shape the future of U.S. trade policy for years to come. Legal challenges to Section 232 began immediately. Plaintiffs argued the law gave the president unchecked power, violating the separation of powers. They claimed the tariffs were economic protectionism, not genuine national security measures. Lower courts were reluctant to challenge presidential authority on national security. Most lawsuits were dismissed, frustrating affected businesses. Persistence paid off when a federal appeals court agreed to review the law's constitutionality. This created a split among circuit courts, making Supreme Court review inevitable. The stage was set for a landmark decision on the limits of executive power in trade. The legal battle reached its climax today. Today, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that Section 232 is unconstitutional. The majority, led by Chief Justice Roberts, found the law gave the president too much unchecked power, violating the separation of powers. National security was deemed too vague a standard for imposing tariffs. The ruling nullifies both the tariffs and the law that enabled them. The court emphasized that only Congress can levy tariffs, and must set clear criteria. Importers and manufacturers benefit immediately. Domestic steel and aluminum producers face new competition. The decision sets a precedent, limiting future presidents' ability to impose tariffs unilaterally. Power shifts back to Congress, reshaping U.S. trade policy for decades. The era of broad executive tariff authority is over. Washington's response was swift and divided. Lawmakers opposing the tariffs hailed the ruling as a win for Congress and consumers. They called for a new, collaborative approach to trade. Tariff supporters, including former President Trump, condemned the decision as a blow to American workers and security. Some vowed to draft new constitutionally sound trade laws, though prospects are uncertain. On Wall Street, markets surged. Companies reliant on steel and aluminum saw stock gains. Domestic steel producers' shares plummeted, facing renewed global competition. Analysts predict a tough adjustment for the metals sector. The market's reaction highlights the winners and losers of protectionist policies. The business community welcomes the return to stability and predictability. The new trade landscape is already taking shape. The Supreme Court's decision will affect your wallet. Tariffs had raised costs for manufacturers, leading to higher prices for cars, appliances, and more. With tariffs gone, economists expect steel and aluminum prices to fall, lowering costs for many goods. Price drops may take months, but relief is coming for consumers. The National Retail Federation estimates families could save hundreds per year. Industries like autos and construction may see growth in job creation as input costs drop. However, domestic steel and aluminum workers face tough competition and possible job losses. Some communities may need government support or retraining programs. The economic impact will be mixed, relief for many, hardship for some. The policy shift will reshape industries and household budgets alike. The effects will unfold in the months ahead. The world is watching. U.S. allies in Europe and North America welcomed the ruling, seeing it as a chance to reset trade relations. Retaliatory tariffs on American goods are expected to be lifted, boosting U.S. exports. The EU and Canada see this as a step toward renewed cooperation. China's response was cautious, noting the decision but emphasizing ongoing trade tensions. The ruling removes one irritant but doesn't resolve deeper U.S.-China disputes. International organizations like the WTO and IMF view the decision as a win for global trade norms. The U.S. signals a move away from unilateral protectionism. Global markets and diplomacy are already responding. For expert insight into this landmark moment, we spoke with Ambassador Jennifer Hillman, a veteran trade negotiator with decades of experience shaping U.S. trade policy. Hillman has served in key roles at the World Trade Organization and the U.S. International Trade Commission, giving her a unique perspective on the implications of this Supreme Court decision. She describes the ruling as the most significant trade law decision in decades, one that will have ripple effects across the entire economy. According to Hillman, this is a turning point that will be studied and debated for years to come. The court's revival of limits on executive power, she explains, now forces Congress to step up and take direct responsibility for crafting and overseeing U.S. trade policy. No longer can lawmakers defer tough choices to the executive branch. The burden is now squarely on their shoulders. Hillman predicts that, overall, this shift will lower costs for most industries and consumers, as tariffs and trade barriers are reconsidered. However, she warns that the steel and aluminum sectors, which have long relied on government protection, will face painful adjustments and increased competition. She stresses the urgent need for robust support systems for workers and communities affected by these changes. Hillman advocates for expanded job training programs, economic assistance, and policies that help workers transition to new opportunities, ensuring no one is left behind. The decision, she argues, marks the end of the simplistic free trade versus protectionism debate. Instead, it opens the door to a more nuanced, thoughtful conversation about what America's trade policy should achieve in a rapidly changing world. Now, Hillman says, Congress must define clear trade policy goals, balancing economic growth, national security, and American values. This means weighing the interests of workers, businesses, and consumers, while also considering the country's strategic priorities. The process, she acknowledges, will be messy and contentious, with passionate debates and competing interests. But, Hillman insists, this is democracy in action. Messy, but ultimately more accountable and transparent. Today's Supreme Court ruling is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new era in U.S. trade. It sets the stage for a fundamental rethinking of how America engages with the global economy. The national conversation on trade policy is just beginning, with experts, lawmakers, and citizens all weighing in on the path forward. The coming months and years will be critical as the country debates its priorities and values. Ultimately, Hillman believes, the future of U.S. trade will be shaped in Congress, not the White House, by the people's representatives in full view of the nation. What's next? The Supreme Court has redrawn the map for U.S. trade policy. The Biden administration and businesses must manage the transition and adjust supply chains. Diplomacy will be key to unwinding retaliatory tariffs and maximizing benefits for U.S. exporters. In Congress, new legislation may be drafted to protect key industries, but passing it will be contentious. The ruling brings trade policy into the public spotlight, inviting citizen engagement. Americans must now debate protect industries or lower costs and promote exports. The story is far from over. Economic and political aftershocks will continue. We'll track every development from Congress to your community. The future of American trade is being forged now. Thank you for joining us. Good night.